This Week in Startups is brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. See why over 3 million members love Dollar Shave Club. Get your first month of the club for free. Just pay shipping. dollarshaveclub.com/twist. And Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code TWIST at checkout to get 10% off. Our iTunes review of the week is from Jazz Fan Dude. Jason C. is just about my favorite interviewer these days, not just in the podcast world, but in virtually any medium. If you like Twist, please write a review.
Hey everybody, today a very special episode of This Week in Startups. We're having another jam session. What's a jam session? That's when I bring together a couple of really smart people to share tips on how to grow your startup. And then I bring my portfolio companies together and we jam out around a topic. Everybody learns, everybody goes back to work with a couple of new tools, a couple of new skills to grow their business. This is like a very practical episode where you're going to learn techniques that will help you grow your business. I've been asked by the audience to do more jam sessions. So this is the third one we've done on air, and you're going to get to see it all right now. Stay tuned. Okay, so our first speaker is Scott Abel, and he is going to tell us how to quickly become an influencer. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I was challenged to help you understand a little bit about what I do and take a lesson that I learned that was a little bit more complicated than perhaps you would need and explain how you can use it today. We're going to talk a little bit about establishing thought leadership by using content manufacturing practices to create some influencer marketing campaigns. So I'm hopefully going to show you how to establish some thought leadership very quickly by leveraging some influencer marketing strategies that are common, but adding a little bit of content manufacturing to help you. So let's start with the common vocabulary first. What's an influencer? So clearly we're talking about people who can impact the way that others think about a product or a service. And influencer marketing would be trying to leverage those people to help you reach other audiences that you can't or you're not capable of reaching today. Content manufacturing is leveraging best practices that are used in manufacturing plants, but instead of thinking about making physical products, this time we're talking about making physical content products and digital content products. Inspiration comes from Peter Drucker, who had these two things to say basically about business, that marketing and innovation are the keys. Everything else you can buy. And so when you've got something innovative, you really need to figure out, how can I get it out in the marketplace? How can I develop an audience? So our company, the Content Wrangler, works with other companies that use an approach called the unified content strategy. It's a great approach that major corporations, mostly multilingual, multinational software, hardware, high-tech companies use to produce complex sets of information into multiple formats, multiple languages for all kinds of devices. And they need to do that on the fly, on demand. They need to be adapt. They need to be able to adapt their content in ways that would not be as efficient if they didn't leverage the power of content manufacturing. Now, there were lots of people in the industry. Content strategy kind of became this huge topic the last few years. There are conferences, books, and all kinds of classes dedicated to it. But those folks started to pony on to these words like content strategy and talk a lot about things that were a watered down version of content strategy, mostly talking about how to write content, how to tell a story. And to me, all of those things you should have graduated from high school being able to do. And the real problem is that we don't treat content as a business asset. It's not on the balance sheet. It's not tracked. We don't actually know exactly where the content is at any one state in its life cycle. And it deserves to be managed efficiently and effectively. Because there was confusion in the marketplace and a lot of people started calling themselves content strategists, the loudest people were shouting all of these things that were not important to businesses. Sure, you're supposed to communicate clearly and concisely relevant information to your audience. Sure, you're supposed to be able to tell a story, but how do you get the story, the right story, to the right person in the right language, in the right format, on the device of their choosing at the time that they need it? But the people who were out there talking about this were better than we were at one thing: marketing. they could sell their stories faster. So to overcome this, we thought, let's use the same practices, the same strategy, the same unified content strategy to create a case study to show other content strategists what we mean by this. And so let's help us get all on the same page. In order to do that, we decided we wanted to leverage some products we had. We had a conference that we were promoting, and we thought, hey, we're going to teach people these things at the conference anyway. Why not use this unified content strategy to elevate my brand, to elevate the sponsors, to make the presenters more famous all at the same time? And also, as a sideline product, let's try to see if we can sell some books, get some webinars sold, consulting services, and speaking services, which are things that my company offers. So we created a content marketing program that basically positioned experts in our field, people who I sometimes actually compete with, as experts about topics related to content strategy. And we leveraged the same tools that bigger companies use to create content in more effective ways, but we scaled it down to make it possible for everyone to do it. Our target project was a book called The Language of Content Strategy. We wanted to make a book, an ebook, a website, and a physical deck of cards, all from a single source of content simultaneously. And in order to do that, we needed to leverage the more complicated unified content strategy. And I needed a gimmick, a plan. And so we picked 52 as a plan. 52 terms by 52 experts who wrote 52 essays. Turns out there's 52 cards in a playing deck. So if I wanted to make a card deck full of flashcards, which we did, with a term and its definition on it, we could do that. We also made a website with the term of the week because there are 52 weeks in every year. So 52 is our strategy target. When we applied the unified content strategy, which is a repeatable way of taking pieces of content, modular, structured, semantically rich content, and having rules and software and standards control where the content ends up, who it gets delivered to. It was started, and it used to be titled single sourcing. This is content that you create once and you use in many applications automatically. It's based on a publishing workflow, inclusion and exclusion. Programmers are familiar with this. And later it became known as intelligent content, which myself and Ann Rockley and Charles Cooper wrote a book on called Intelligent Content, a Primer. You can borrow these lessons to create your own influencer campaign. So I'm going to share a few of them with you today. So these are the steps that we go through. First, we identified all the terms that organizations had to understand in order to understand what a unified content strategy is and why they might need to understand that. Then we had to find experts, people who would contribute content, people that were like me, that were like others in our industry sector, often people we compete with, or people that we partner with, or people that we respect. And we went out, we selected these subject matter experts, and we built a spreadsheet with the terms and the contributors that we hoped would write something for our book project. Then we went out and we pitched those people. We made the business case for why they should participate. We made it a very clear what our expectations were. We told them exactly what we were going to do. We were going to create a book, an ebook, a website, a deck of cards. We're going to do presentations and webinars. Basically, we're creating an inventory of content experts, a directory of all the people that you need to know and all the topics that are important to understand. Then we got them to sign an agreement. We made it simple by using an online document management tool that allows for electronic signatures. It was easy for us to put all the people in and send them all the same contract at exactly the same time, which meant that we had to have some standards. We had to have an approach that we were going to use every time. We were not going to break any rules, and nor did we. We had to make it really easy. And when we make something really easy, it sometimes becomes really hard. So we thought it would be really easy if we gave everybody one word and they only had to write a 2-sentence definition of that word in a 250-word essay, which most people signed up for and said, hey, 250 words, that's not very much. Turns out it's sometimes difficult to take a complex topic and talk about what it is and why you need to know about it. So we had to create some examples for them to show them what a good piece of content would look like. In other words, experts can be really smart at what they do, but maybe not very good at communicating it. We also had to find a way to bring it all together. And because we helped bigger companies do this with lots of budget, lots of different kinds of software tools, we had to figure out a process to do this on our budget, which was basically borrow, beg, steal, and buy things that are inexpensive. In order to do that, we had to have our process down pat because we had to talk to the software companies and the others that we wanted to help us, and we had to tell them exactly what we were trying to do. So the requirements had to be very tight. And then we had to design a cleanup and approval process that was not going to add more work to our pipeline. And so we basically came up with a way for everybody to do exactly the same thing by submitting their content into a wiki. Now, you could use a Google Doc or some other kind of common thing where you could have expert contributors submit their content and you could have reviewers edit it. But we want to make sure that the rules that we make and the cleanup that we do allow for them to have their own voice. They need to be able to speak with their own voice with authority. But at the same time, we have to honor the end user of the content. We can't have a book that's created with a bunch of different voices that sounds like none of these people are in sync. So we had to find a way to synchronize them. So we had an editor who reviewed everything, who understood all the topics. We also had to prepare to publish. And in this case, we created an editorial calendar that was based on 52 weeks with 52 terms for 52 experts with 52 topics, 52 blog posts, 52. And as we scheduled it and we got the publishing process ready, we realized that tools now allow us to schedule and publish. So you can schedule an advanced blog post, you can schedule an advanced tweets and Facebook updates. So we had all this built into our publishing process.
Hey, everybody, let me take a moment to tell you about a product I am addicted to and I love and that I use every week. It is Dollar Shave Club. Of course, you've heard of Dollar Shave Club before, but I want to tell you why I love it and give a personal endorsement because it has been life-changing for me. I no longer go buy razors. I no longer go buy creams to shave. I get it all delivered to me, and I get it all for like a third of the price. So basically, I don't have to think. I don't have to worry about running out of blades. I don't have to worry about dull blades. I consistently get my Dollar Shave Club. Now I get the executive blade. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I get it for a third of the price. And 3 million members like me love Dollar Shave Club. They make amazing razors, as you know. And you don't have to deal with going to the drugstore or just these like locked up razor fortresses where like everything is proprietary and it's expensive. You just go to dollarshaveclub.com and you pick a razor from their lineup of amazing blades. I get the first class shave when I use the executive blade. I'm an executive, obviously. I think it's got 5 blades or something. It's amazing. It's so smooth. In fact, I had to adjust a little bit because my old razors, I was kind of like putting a little force behind them. And I didn't think they weren't as sharp, but with the Dollar Shave Club executive blade, it's so sharp that I had to dial it back a little bit. And then the really interesting thing was I was always like a gel kind of guy, but I started using the shave butter, Dr. Carver shave butter. This stuff is so rich and creamy and thick that it really protects your skin. So I use the executive blade. I use this Dr. Carver shave butter. Now, with the shave butter, it is a little bit thicker and it protects your skin, which means you have to wash it out a little bit more. So I do about double the washing it out under the sink. You really got to give it a good wash, clear off the blade, and then do your next swipe. But it is worth it because it's so smooth. And, you just feel like $1 million without paying for it. It's the best shave I ever got. And I would tell you if it wasn't. I'll never read, that's my promise to you all in the audience, I will never read any partner message unless I really use the product myself. I sincerely use it. I've got it stacked up now because I ordered a couple extra. I love it. And I've turned a couple of people onto it. So they're so confident over there at the Dollar Shave Club of all their products that they are going to give you the first month free to join the club. You just pay for the shipping. That's a good deal. After that, it's just a couple of bucks a month. There's no long-term commitment. You can cancel at any time. There's no hidden fees. They're just not into any nonsense over there. It's just like a great shave at a third of the price. It's better than anything else you're getting, and you never have to worry about it. Go to dollarshaveclub.com/twist. dollarshaveclub.com/twist. I sincerely love this product. It's exceptional. Go get it. You'll love it. Let me know what you think of it. Okay, that's it. Let's get back to this amazing program.
Then with the tools that we happened to select, we published our content. And of course, before that, we tested it. We wanted to make sure that everything looked the way we anticipated it would look. But we also had to be willing to break that paradigm. Because as it turns out, one of the legacies from old school publishing is that you think you know what it looks like on every output format, but you do not. And you have to be okay with that. And so we had to kind of look for inconsistencies, but we couldn't go in and hard code any fixes. We had to allow for some flexibility. And then number 10, we have to amplify the effort. So we have all this content now. How are we going to leverage it? Well, it turns out that there are tons of companies who want to do exactly what we're doing here today, share information and best practices and lessons learned about all kinds of topics that are of use to people who are in business. So there were marketers who were dying to have some of our experts do webinars for them on exactly the same topic that they wrote about in the book. Interviews in magazines, conference presentations. We had a series of infographics created from that. And then we get guest spots on shows like this to come and talk about our efforts. All of these things were possible because myself and my co-author organized 52 people together who were experts. We did not write the book ourselves. We curated it. We curated the content, the terms, the people, and all the different things that we wanted them to do. My return on investment was totally accidental in many ways. I had a sold out conference, which was part of my goal. And we created a book that sold, and that was part of my goal. Getting some additional consulting gigs was good for me, and it happened for lots of people who were in the book project. But my conference also was elevated to a higher, a higher noticeability. And a bigger group called the Content Marketing Institute came along and snatched up our conference on intelligent content and made it part of their portfolio. The Content Marketing Institute and Content Marketing World now have intelligent content. They packaged it up and they sold that for $17 million to a much bigger company. It also increased my influence. Automatically, I was on all kinds of lists of the most influential marketers, the most influential content engineers, the most influential content strategists, and I was able to get a lot of Google juice out of that, which led to paid speaking gigs and opportunities to do things like I'm doing here today. So my result is basically a repeatable process now. The first book was called The Language of Content Strategy. Since then, we've published The Language of Technical Communication with 52 technical communication experts, et cetera, et cetera. The Language of Translation and Localization, The Language of Cybersecurity. These books are all in the queue, and now experts are coming to me and saying, I want to do that the way you've done it. In order to kind of make this something that's a product, we had to actually go out and think about what that means. So what does it mean to you? Well, you can own the conversation about the terms in your space. You could own the conversation about the people, the places, the things, all the nouns, all the things that are interesting in your area. And I hope that you do. And if you could borrow this approach, you can actually plan out a whole year's worth of content, get it all done, do 80% of the work up front, have tools do 20% of it for you, and you can start to benefit from influencer marketing.
Great. Well done.
Thank you.
So you're an expert, but you asked 52 experts to define the topics as opposed to just defining them yourself.
Correct.
Which would have been more work, just writing the topics yourself? Because you didn't have to then go find somebody to write it. So why not just write 52 definitions yourself and be done with it?
First of all, that implies that I actually know what all those words mean and that I am the authority on them, which I am not. And so I felt like that's kind of insulting to everybody. I like to talk. I like to be on stage. If the light is on me, I'm going to allow it. But that doesn't mean that people should be, listening to me only. And so I thought by broadening the discussion, we brought into the fold people who disagree with me on some things, but now they love me because I'm promoting them. I made them part of an environment where they're getting exposure they never would in ways that they couldn't do themselves.
And what is there a requirement for them if they write this? They have to promote it in some way, they have to tweet it, or is it just kind of imply that you'll tweet it and promote it?
We had some suggestions, which during the first time we were learning, right, how to do this and what would be our best practices we discovered later. So the answer is yes, we provided some suggestions on how to do it, even some tweets in advance. We would alert them each week in advance that your term will be the term of the week and we're going to be featuring you. You're going to be published on our website. You're going to be in all these different places. Would you go ahead and amplify the message as well? The majority of them did that.
But it wasn't contractual. You didn't say, hey, if you're going to put the term in,
it was
three things we asked.
It was in the
tweet it, do a blog
it was in the
post.
contract, but we weren't trying to be litigious. We were certainly just trying to guide them and thought that document could be the one place so we don't have 20 different places for information.
So Brian, do you think this applies to business only, or do you think you could see this working for business to consumer companies?
So my guess is it's going to work for both, but in very different ways. So business to consumer, you're obviously trying to reach consumers in consumer places. Business to business, there are probably other places to reach them. So I think the terminology is maybe a straight up business thing, but maybe here are the 52 experts in your space, or here are the 52 products around the space that you're in, right? So thinking of some of your portfolio companies, like Rapify with the cars, right? They have advertising things, they have auto things, they have commuting things. Maybe they want to own things in that space. So I think it's going to be two different flavors of what they do, and it's not always going to be terminology necessarily, but it could be people, it could be something. But I think it'll be different, consumer versus business.
I could see this being a total SEO bonanza because you have 52 different experts who theoretically would have high page rank followings on social media linking to their page and then to each other, and you're linking to them. So the page rank must have been great for this website.
It was great. In fact, that wasn't a focus of ours because we knew that would probably kind of happen just organically by everybody connecting to one another. But now that we realize that, we also are starting to think differently about how to publish the content. So do we want to publish in multiple languages? Because as it turns out, people like to search in the language that's their own.
Right.
And so we need multilingual SEO. So we're actually having some people investigate how to translate those words without losing the intent of the creator.
And since you haven't done localization, you're writing a 52 expert book on localization.
Yes, actually.
So basically anything you have to get done, you just ask other people to do your work.
I do.
And then promote it.
I do.
It's incredibly lazy and effective. I love it. This is a strategy I can get behind.
So I think the cool part about that is, when Scott and I have talked in the past, he has a whole tool chain behind this. So it started, I think, as a simple wiki.
Correct.
But you could do this with the Google Forms and Google Docs.
Yeah.
But he built it up into a bit of a machine. So once you have that machine, then saying, okay, every single term has these 7 other languages is just more fields in a database.
Well, I can see, I'm just thinking about some of our portfolio companies. We have May from LeadIQ here today. I could see, since LeadIQ works in the sales and CRM space, doing the language of CRM, or just, if you're not going to, I'm assuming that's one of your trademarks, the language of. So you could just do how to, or just 52 weeks of sales techniques and sales terminology, or catching up, or whatever it is on sales. And hey, you might rank for CRM or prospecting, or whatever it is.
I think it's brilliant.
It's pretty brilliant. Okay, so let's take a question from one of our portfolio companies in the launch fund. May from LeadIQ, you have a question.
Right. Thank you. Scott, it's really brilliant strategy. I love it. One question though is, once we are big enough, like once we are a company with a brand and have a lot of followers, a lot of influencers would want to work with us. But when we are still a small company, how do we sell to those influencers that they know that, why should I work with you? How do I know that you will have the followers, and am I just wasting my time working with a small company?
Sure. And so that's an important point. You should have an audience and have benefits, or you don't have something to sell. So you definitely have to go out and start working that before you start pitching to the big players. So small consultants, for example, who may be very bright and know a lot about the topic, but may not have that superstar feeling yet where they only want to work with big brands, are very much your target. If you can get a diverse group of them and then use that roster to attract some big players, you'll be able to do it better than going after the bigger people first. You should also know that there are lots of people telling people to do this kind of influencer marketing. And so it's very common for me to get 8, 10, 12 requests a week to answer just one question, Scott. Just one question. It'll only take 5 minutes. So you have to be very respective of their time and build a value proposition that you're going to be able to back up, which is why we decided we'd schedule everything in advance. We knew we could promise the blog post. We knew we could promise the social media tweets because we wrote them all in advance and they were all scheduled. All we then had to do was assure that happened, use some measurement tools to give them feedback on what we learned and what happened, and then they usually would come back to us. And that the interesting thing was that they were learning from us while we were learning from them. So it can be a two-way street.
In a way, if you're doing something and you're early in your career, maybe go with other people who are early in their careers, who you have the up-and-comers. If you're very well established, you can move up the food chain, but don't think you're going to get Gary Vaynerchuk or Robert Scoble for your first outing, because you need them way more. And I think people understand that this is free marketing for you, so they can be cynical about it. So I've get so many requests of this. I literally told somebody yesterday, who I had agreed to do with it, sorry, I can't do this for you. They wanted to do like an interview, like how do we use your product? I said, I'm only doing this type of marketing for our portfolio companies and for people who are partners on our podcast, sponsors of our events, et cetera. I'm just not doing it for anybody else because I have 150 investments and 50 partners. If I get done with those 200 every year who ask for tweets and ask for content, maybe, but I think it's highly unlikely because you are getting so many of these requests.
Yeah, and I think it's also keeping up with the Joneses. So if you're not perceived as one of the Joneses, nobody cares. So one of your goals could be to elevate your brand enough that people recognize that you're talking about these things too. And then when they make, let's say, a list of influential people in your industry, which somebody else will probably do if you don't do it, you might be number 30 or number 36 or number 40, but now you're on a list that you're going to start getting momentum and you're going to go upward in the list. And it's very easy to do that once you've got noticed by one or two influential groups. So also, you want to contribute and offer yourself up to the people who are really busy and say, hey, could I do something for your team? Is it possible that I have some value? You'd be surprised at how many times people are looking for content and they just need somebody to talk to.
Hey, let me tell you about a flawless product that I use every day. It's called Squarespace. And we build all our websites on it because it simply works and I don't need to hire tons of developers or designers to have a great looking website up and running in minutes. And if you go to launchscale.net or you go to launch.co or you go to any of our websites, Launch Festival, we always use Squarespace because it's intuitive and easy to use and all of the people on my team can log in just like they're using Google Docs or Microsoft Word or just a calendar app. And they can just edit the website. It makes things so easy to use. And you get a free domain if you sign up for a year. It's trusted by millions and some of the most respected brands in the world. So getting started is free trial today at squarespace.com. And when you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TWIST and get 10% off your first purchase. Yes, go to squarespace.com, sign up for free. Hey, you get a free domain name if you do it free here. And when you decide to sign up, because at least sign up for free for a trial because they're so confident, you can use the promo code TWIST. Thank you to Squarespace. I mean, they've been a supporter of this program and independent media like this program for years. Really great company. And if you're a developer or a designer or a business development person or a business person, let me tell you, that's probably the best company you could work for in New York. Anthony over there does a great job and it's a great team. Everybody go ahead and thank at Squarespace on their Twitter and Facebook handles and go ahead and give it a shot. If you've got a small business or your mom or your uncle or your cousin needs to get a website up and running or you have a special project or a portfolio or you want to do commerce or calendars, all that stuff is in there and it looks like $1 million and you only pay tens of dollars. Okay, thanks again to Squarespace. Next up on our jam session is Arjun Moorthy. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You did indeed.
Okay, now I understand you're going to talk to us about how to widen your sales by paying resellers to become a channel for your product.
That's right.
Okay. You have the floor.
Okay, great. So let's dive right in. My name is Arjun Moorthy, and I currently I'm the CEO of CivikOwl, which is a new startup in the social activism journalism space. Previously, I'd spent about 5 years at HubSpot. I think most people know HubSpot, but just in case, it's a software company out of Boston. It's been around for about 10 years. It's about $300 million in revenue and went public about last year. So for half the time, I was head of BD, and the other half the time, I did the channel sales program. Most of the good things that I'm going to say today actually come from this gentleman on the right. His name's Pete Caputa. He's actually the founder of the reseller program at HubSpot. So anything good comes from him. Anything stupid comes from me. And just an exclamation point on that, Pete actually wrote a great book on how he built the reseller program. It's at OpenView Labs. So if you really care a lot about this topic, I would encourage you to read about it. A couple of the caveats before I dive in. One of the things is that HubSpot's reseller program is somewhat unique, being that our software is marketing software. The resellers that we ended up working with were marketing agencies, not your typical IT resellers, for example. So some of the things that I say may be a little bit specific to them. But really the other reason that I mentioned that is because Pete himself had a marketing agency before he joined HubSpot as VP of Sales. And that was perhaps the most important element of why we succeeded, was because Pete actually was the guy that we were trying to sell to. So he knew what they would go through. He actually acutely knew because his agency didn't do very well. It made a big difference. So if there's one tip that I would say out of all of this, if you're going to build a reseller program, you should find your equivalent of Pete. Okay, so first of all, why care about a channel sales program? A couple of reasons that I can cite from HubSpot. First, in HubSpot, we drove about 40% of our revenue through the channel sales program. It was the single largest segment for a few of the years. Now, perhaps not so much. And then the second is that it had the best ratio of lifetime value to cost of acquisition of all the segments that we had in our sales. So at this point, if I was holding a mic, I would drop it and walk out. But since I don't have that, we'll keep going. Normally, when your CEO comes and says, we should build a channel sales program, the idea they have in mind is, let's sign up all these people, and we'll pay them lots of commission, and boom, they'll go and sell our stuff. And they think of it as a very cheap way to ramp up sales and get huge distribution. That's actually not likely to be very successful. And you can probably guess, perhaps looking at this picture, is if you take that approach, you tend to get resellers that are not very loyal to you. And loyalty ends up mattering a lot when you build a reseller program. What a channel program really is having this loyalty across a large group of resellers, so much so that they're actually a competitive moat in your company. And to be really specific, at HubSpot, when we filed for to go public, in our S1, we wrote that our reseller program was a competitive advantage. It made sense. We had something like 2,500 marketing agencies that sold for us and almost exclusively sold for us without even having to ever promise to be exclusive. That's a tremendous advantage. It's very hard for someone else to come in and then disrupt that because they're such a distributed force. So a channel program built well actually is a very strong competitive advantage, and as you can see, also has huge financial benefits. Okay. The first thing that I'd say is most people think of a channel sales program if they think, what do we give the resellers? The word that comes to mind for most people is commission. All right, you sell something, we'll cut you in on the deal, you'll get X points of commission. You sell more, you get more commission, etc. That's a pretty common misconception. At least in software sales these days, that's not the truth. The reason that the resellers are in this and they choose to sell your product is because of the services that they can add on top. And maybe a really good example is at HubSpot, for every $1 of commission that we paid a reseller, they usually got at least $10 to $15 of services that they were able to bill. And that too in a recurring fashion. So if you think about that, it's like the commission is peanuts. It's almost negligible. It's important, but it's really not that important. And once you understand that, then you start to think about your reseller program in terms of what services will this reseller build atop my product and what will make them be really fabulously wealthy because of that. If you can understand that story really well, then you have a better chance of convincing the resellers to sell your product. So that's the first thing I'd say is it's the service is stupid. It's really not the commission. The next thing that I'd say is a lot of channel sales programs, after a while, they have a few, dozen, 100, whatever, they tend to unveil some sort of a tiers program. So bronze, silver, gold, platinum, whatever, some medal of the day, and as a way to differentiate partners from each other, and usually based on something like sales or retention or something else, you climb up the ranks. That's very good, and it does in fact work. Resellers do love to have these badges and differentiate themselves on the basis of their expertise. However, one thing that's different at HubSpot that we did, which most people don't do, is we never changed the commission between these levels. So we paid 20% commission at every level, no matter what. And we didn't think much about it at the start, but it turned out to be really important. And the main reason is that if you got more commission as you went up the ladder, you could conceivably discount the software greater than a reseller that was junior to you because they got less commission. So someone senior to you said, I don't really care about the commission because it's all about the services, so I'm going to basically find a way to discount the software off my commission. And then they would undercut each other. That creates a horrible environment. So you don't want your resellers to compete with each other that much, especially not on price. You want them to compete on other reasons, on services and value, but not on price like that. So keeping a consistent commission, even as you roll out a tiers program, is another good tip that we learned. The next one that I would say is, as you start to scale, you typically tend to have a direct sales team a lot of times and a channel sales team. And the two of them usually don't like each other. It can be a little bit of a fight, as an understatement. So how do you get these two to get along? There's no silver bullet, unfortunately, but I'll tell you a couple of things that we did and hopefully can help. The first is you need to have good lead registration. So each team has to be very transparent about, I'm working with so-and-so prospect. And that requires a CRM system that makes it easy for partners to register leads and for direct sales reps to say, these are my leads. It seems like a very simple and obvious thing. It's actually quite complicated on how you register, how long you can own a lead for, how do you give up a lead, what is counted as active. It's kind of a mess. So certainly seek out some of the blog posts perhaps on HubSpot sales about that, because it is quite an in-depth topic. But this single issue of conflict between direct sales and channel sales, if you don't think of it from day one, it will definitely kill your channel sales program, because the direct sales team almost always wins the internal political battle because they're closer inside. So if you don't have this set up really clean at the start, they'll always say the channel sales team is terrible, channel resellers are awful, and eventually you will destroy them. Okay. Maybe one other thing that I'd mention is at some point you'll start to have, hopefully, lots of resellers. And you're thinking, this is great. And the question comes up, often from the CEO, how many resellers do you want? And so the trick that we found is you don't want too few. And I made this mistake early on. I thought, okay, let's have a few really, really good partners. We'll invest a lot in them. We'll make them successful. And it's good, but first of all, it's a lot of risk in a few baskets. And if one of them starts to become really a big part of your sales, then they can somewhat hold you hostage. They can say, yeah, you know what, I'm 5% of your revenue, so actually you are going to do X, Y, Z for me. It's not really a position that you want to be in. Conversely, if you actually have too many resellers, tens of thousands, for example, then what ends up happening is resellers find out from each other or in the marketplace that this is just a slugfest. They get out there and they compete with each other, and there's really no money to be made. So there's kind of this happy medium that you have to achieve where there are just enough resellers in any particular geography or product market segment so that there's competition that keeps prices attractive for customers, but not too much competition that it just drives all the resellers out. Again, there's no hard science on this. Some people use fancy algorithms, like they take the GDP per zip code and do all kinds of calculations based on that. But I would say if you want a loose rule of thumb, at least for the software that we sell to small and mid-sized businesses, you want more than a few hundred and less than a few thousand. And certainly if you look at really prolific reseller program companies, Cisco, HP, Avaya, those kinds of people, Intuit, all of them have always gone through this phase of, okay, we have way too many resellers and we need to let some of them go. And that's a miserable thing to go through, is firing resellers. It creates really bad reputation. So hopefully you don't get there and you really plan ahead of time how many resellers you want in the program. So those are most of the tips. I'd say at HubSpot, we also added a little bit of our flavor to the story. And this is something that Pete did really well. He figured out that resellers, marketing agency owners, weren't really good at sales. They were really marketing people. And yet here they were, they had started a business and they had to go out and sell, and they weren't very good at it. And Pete had actually done formal sales training and is really phenomenal at sales. Everything that I ever learned, I learned from him in sales. And so he invested a lot of time teaching his resellers how to sell. And not like, here's a video, here's a blog post. He would go on calls with them, he would vet ops, he would be like a very strict sales manager with them. And that kind of investment was just amazing. Resellers had never had that. And they had huge loyalty to Pete and then to the reseller program. So Pete in turn taught all of us. We then worked with our resellers. And so once you had this thing where you invested so much in them genuinely, they really trusted you. They were really loyal to you. And that's where, coming back to that first point, our resellers tended to sell HubSpot software exclusively, and yet there was nothing in the contract that ever said they had to be exclusive to us. They just, at some point, we had invested so much in them, and we knew so much about their business that they were invested in it the same way. So I'd say, see if you can find something like that. Other cool things that we did when we IPO'd, our CEO, Brian Halligan, set aside stock just for resellers. So very much like pre-IPO shares that employees got, he did the same thing for resellers, really treating them as part of the family versus an outsourced sales team. Those are the tips. Brian had suggested that I also talk about how we might think of this applying to a couple of the portfolio companies here for Jason. Two that I thought of, so Wrapify is an interesting company. They wrap your car with advertising and give you money. So an interesting reseller opportunity could be, and again, I don't really know too much about this space, if you think of people that do your oil and gas filter change, things like that, they might not be doing very well these days, because if you think about synthetic oils, actually now in most of your cars, you tend to change your oils less than you used to. It used to be every 3,000 miles. Increasingly, we tend to change it less. So these guys might not be doing very well. They may have a pain point, and yet they do see these cars on a semi-frequent basis. Could they be someone that actually starts to deliver this service? Could be interesting. Again, it might be a stupid idea, but just trying to think of segments that you could work with resellers that are maybe a little non-traditional. That's where you tend to find really good opportunities, is where not everyone else is going to look for a reseller. Similarly, RushTix, which is a company that has basically sort of a subscription model to tickets, theater tickets, that kind of stuff. There I was thinking, concert promoters, especially independent concert promoters, these smaller concert promoters, I don't think their business is particularly profitable. Could you have an opportunity, because you are bringing a subscription model, to do the same thing that HubSpot did, which was where we said, hey, marketing agencies, most of you get this one-time revenue stuff. You do a project, it's great, then it goes away, then you have to fire everyone, then you're trying to get the next project, then you hire everyone, then you fire everyone. Instead, we showed them how to do recurring services with content marketing. Similarly, could RushTix also do something like that, where concert promoter doesn't have the spiky revenue model and instead has more of a recurring revenue model because of the subscription base that is RushTix? So maybe some of the things that HubSpot did could be applied here. Hope that helps.
Very well done. Arjun, great presentation. Let me ask you a question about how much effort this takes before you start to see money come in. Because this sounds like an incredible investment of time and money and resources. How many people do you need? How much time does it take to set up properly? And when would you see your first dollars come in your estimation, for the two examples we had here?
Yeah.
Those two are startups specifically. So if Wrapify were to do it, how many people would have to work on this? How long would it take? When would they see revenue come in?
So I would say you can actually do it surprisingly quickly on the cheap, because you don't know yet what's going to work. So it's kind of like a lean startup thing. You don't go and invest a ton and build this huge edifice on reseller programs and channels before you know, is this actually going to work? Is this actually the right segment? So when Pete started, Pete was a single quota-carrying rep. And Halligan said, all right, Pete, you want to do a reseller? Great, kudos to you. You still have a quota to meet. Figure it out. And so it was one rep. And the one benefit he did get was he was actually somehow dotted lining into marketing, so he got a lot of help from marketing. So he got kind of, I'd say, a half marketer to start. So if I were doing this as in my company, I would say take a rep and give him half a marketer, and that's enough. Prove it out there, and don't spend any more until that person starts to hit quota with some segment and says, this is working, I can see it, but I would do 10x more if you just gave me X, Y, Z. Okay, well then let's talk about it.
And how much training and resources do you need to put into that? Because it sounds to me like if this person who changes oil needs to now sell wrapped cars, they've never done that before.
Yeah.
I mean, how much time would that take to train them? What kind of resources does that take? And then when would you see the first dollar coming in? If you were running Wrapify instead of James, what would you expect to see? What month? How many weeks after? How many months after you start this program would you expect to see dollars coming in?
So I would say it could be as much as a year.
Wow.
Yes.
It could take a year.
Yeah, it takes a long time.
Before money comes in.
Because you're basically going to a business that is run one way and telling them, go change this. And by the way, I don't work with you. I don't even see you that often. You barely know who I am, and I'm telling you to change a whole bunch of things. They're like, who died and made you king? So it's going to take a while. And that's why that first person, that's why I said find your Pete. Find that person that was ideally from the segment you're trying to sell to, so they really understand it. They have some credibility when they go and say, I used to run a Jiffy Lube. I remember what it was like. It sucked. I'm here to try to tell you a better way to do it, because I wish someone had told me this when I ran a Jiffy Lube. Hopefully someone that was really bright. It'll still take a while, but they're not just working on one person. They might be working on 10 or 20.
Right.
And so it might take as much as a year. I would say for Pete in the early days, he started to see reselling sometimes as early as 3 to 6 months. But he was just very patient, and he worked with a lot. He probably worked with about 20 people, I think, before he started to see reselling come in steadily. And he was the lone rep, I think, for almost 18 months before he added the next person.
What were that individual's sales compared to the average salesperson when he finally got to year 2? Was he 10x a regular salesperson going direct? Was he 5x, 3x in terms of total sales?
He carried, so we didn't change the quotas between direct and channel for years. So they carried the same quota, but channel tended to overperform a little bit. So on attainment, I would say they were more like 30 to 50% better than direct. But what ended up happening was not only were they better at attainment, but our cost of acquisition was lower because we tended not to pay marketing for each of those, right? Someone else was basically
So they were 30 to 50% more efficient, but they didn't spend as much money,
Exactly.
so therefore they were even more efficient.
Right.
And you said earlier in the presentation the LTV was greater.
Right. So
that made them even more efficient.
Correct. They stayed longer because they had someone that was delivering services to them consistently. So versus me, like, again, I don't know Rapify very well, but I have to check in with you and figure out, okay, here's a new campaign. If it was Jiffy Lube, I know you're going to that person at least once every year, right? Or whatever, the approximate. So you're going to go and check in with them. If you are delivering high quality service every time, it's a better touch point versus me having to find time to call you, set up something. So it could conceivably work better. That's what the marketing agency did was, I'm here every month. We have a retainer together. That's why it ends up being much better services. That's why they see more value from the software. They stayed much longer.
Final question for me. Do you have to have product market fit before you do this? In other words, you have to have sold 10, 20 people yourself directly, understand the value proposition, understand the marketing, understand the training, understand how the product works, so that you can then have somebody play telephone and try to copy your sales process?
Yes. To be fair, at HubSpot, we did it slightly stagger step. But ideally, I would say yes. And that's because early on, before you have product market fit, you want to be as close to the customer and get as much of the feedback direct to your ears, not filtered through someone that takes time to get back to you. So nothing between you and the customer until you're like, we have a great product, it rocks. I just want to get great distribution. By the way, here's a segment and how we can do it.
Brian, any feedback?
So no question. I just thought it was fascinating. We met Peter Caputa a long time ago. He blogged for us at Weblogs Inc. I don't remember which blog, what it was on, because we didn't have like a marketing genius blog or a CRM blog, right? But he was fantastic, and I've kept in touch with him over the years. And so he recommended Arjun when I asked for some speakers for this stuff. And I love the guy. I've tried to hire him away, but it's kind of like, it'd be like Clipisode hiring away like the Snapchat number 2 exec. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
He's on a rocket ship, and he's doing really well. And like you said, it's like 40% of their revenue is from this guy, what this guy does.
Yeah,
so it's very impressive.
Okay, let's take a question from one of our portfolio companies at the Launch Fund. Andrew from Density, you had a question?
Yeah, that was a really interesting presentation. I'm curious how applicable it is to startups, specifically because I think sort of a similar question around how far along does a company need to be before you can start to meaningfully apply a sales channel. I think it makes a lot of sense for distribution, but if you really haven't hit product market fit, then how do you kind of think about channel sales?
Yeah. Similar to the previous question, I think early on, be as close to the customer so you're getting as much of the feedback directly versus filtered and time delayed. So early on, I would say a channel program is probably not as relevant unless it turns out that the segment you're going to actually only buys from the channel. Like they're just not used to dealing with direct salespeople. If you can think about certain customers, actually even IT, for some segments, they don't buy direct from vendors. They buy through their authorized resellers. So good luck trying to sell direct to someone. It's not going to work. So it depends on who are you trying to sell to, what's their buying pattern, where do they spend time, who do they trust to make the decision that they need to make to get your product. And when you look at that, then you say, okay, it's clear that I could send my rock star in, but it's going to take her years for her to build the credibility with this customer. Instead, they seem to trust these 3 people, and so do a whole slew of them. Let's try to build a relationship with those 3.
So channel could be something that's early, like an early part of your strategy.
Yeah. It really, again, it depends on who your customer is and how they make their purchasing decision, and then you decide what to go. But if you have something like at HubSpot where people bought both direct from a vendor or direct from a reseller, then I would say stick to direct, just because you just need to learn so much early on, And channel introduces a whole set of variables that are hard. So don't take on those variables unless it's like, actually, that's the only way to do this. There's even a whole debate on, can a company actually have both channel and direct? And there are many very smart people that say you can't. You must be one or the other. We somehow pulled it off. It's still contentious, but that's why early on some companies are just like, you know what, we're 100% channel right from day one, and they do it. Very successful companies do that as well.
Great. Awesome. Well done. Okay, next up is John Doherty. He is going to talk about why startup founders should do less content, but do it much better. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. So the title of my talk today is, I'm calling it Engineering Content at a Growth Startup. So my name is John Doherty. I'm the founder of GetCredo.com, which I call Credo. It's a marketplace that I started myself as a solo founder, still bootstrapped. But my background is in B2C acquisition, so SEO, email, content, et cetera, for B2C startups. I'm currently running a B2B startup, so I'm learning to apply these principles to my own company. So this is mostly focused on B2C startups. So as a growth startup, what you're trying to do is you're trying to hit escape velocity, right? You're not trying to just continue on like I am. You're bootstrapping, you're growing 10, 15% month on month. It's a great lifestyle business, let you do what you want to do. You're trying to go big, right? You're trying to return Jason's money 10x, 20x, 30x, 40x, whatever you get as an angel. More than that, 100x, 150x, 10x for your Series A. So you're trying to hit escape velocity. Blogging is not going to get you there. Traditional blogging is not going to get you there. So I don't believe that most companies, especially like seed stage companies, startups, should not have a blog, or if they do have a blog, it needs to be for a very specific purpose. So basically my advice is don't have a blog that you're planning on getting you a lot of customers unless you really love to write, right? People often say, oh, you should do content marketing as a startup, and here are all the things you should do. You should do this keyword research for SEO. You should do all of these different things. And they often reference people like Seth Godin or Rand Fishkin or people like that, right? Those guys are writers. They have to write. I was talking to Rand one time. I was basically like, you have to write to get thoughts out of your head in order to be a sane person, right? He's like, yeah, exactly. I'm the same way. I love to write. I've been blogging for 15 years. Seth Godin has written, 16, 18, 20 books, probably up from there. He's a writer. He loves to write. He blogs every single day. If you're not a writer, you don't love to write, and you're not good at writing, you're not going to be able to blog every single day and scale like he has. Plus, blogging can take a really long time to earn you a good-sized audience. If you're trying to hit that escape velocity like I'm talking about, you're not going to be able to do that with just a blog. So many of you there are many technical founders in startups, of course. You have to be able to create a product. Hopefully you have a co-founder that can sell or something like that. But you're an engineer, so play to your strengths. I believe that you can engineer your way to scalable content success as long as you find the right story. So we are talking a little bit about storytelling. We're also going to talk about how you can scalably create this content. As I said, you're a founder, you're not a marketer. Likely, there are some of us that are marketers and founders. You likely don't have a pre-built audience for your startup. You're trying to get something new off the ground. So you don't have that audience, but you do know how to code. You might know how to do sales. You're not a writer, and that's totally okay. So it's time, I would say, for technical founders to become, especially without a non-technical co-founder, to become what a friend of mine, Michael King, has called a marketing technologist. So learning how to tie these different systems together. So when you create content, and I'm going to talk about what I mean by that, then you have systems in place that can push them out scalably to amplify your message. So let's talk about a technologist as a marketer. Increasingly, startup marketing is about tying together your different systems to make them work together. You have all these disparate systems. You have a CRM, you have an email provider, you have your social media accounts, you have your blog or your website. Let's just call it your website. And you're trying to make these work together in order to amplify, so you're not publishing a big piece of content that we talked about. You're publishing your 52 weeks, and then every week you have to go and you have to write fresh tweets, and you have to write a fresh blog post, and you have to write a fresh social media updates, and you have to go and create a custom audience on Facebook to promote it to, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It takes a lot of work. You're a startup founder, you don't have a ton of time, especially as a solo founder. If you're very early days, you don't have a ton of time. You have a lot of other stuff to do. So it is possible to tie these together. I believe I've done it. So where you need to start is, I'm going to go back to keyword research. My background is in SEO. What are people talking about? What stories can you tell? So every industry, I believe, has interesting stories to tell. If it's Lead IQ, you have stories to tell about the companies that really, can benefit from this. Telling who is your ideal customer, telling their stories, doing case studies, that sort of thing. But starting with the keyword research to ask, what are people actually caring about in my industry? So one example is when I was running marketing for hotpads.com, which is owned by Zillow. It was 2 years ago, and it was in the middle of just this huge rental boom, right? Rents in San Francisco were skyrocketing. New York, where I lived before, was skyrocketing. And everyone was talking about, like, how unaffordable is it? And is it going to continue being this unaffordable, or are we going to be able to take it, or is it actually going to level off to an extent? 2 years later now in San Francisco, we've seen that it's leveled off. It's actually dropped a little bit, but I was like, it might actually be pretty interesting to go and say, okay, what is actually going to be built in San Francisco in the next couple of years? Because everyone is saying there's not enough building going on. So I took some data that we had. It's called the ALN database that we had access to, and basically took their data and plotted it on a Google map. You can do that within Google Maps. Use the Bing Webmaster Tools, the Bing Maps API. Free API, and plotted it right there and started doing outreach to the curbs, so Curb San Francisco or Curb New York or Curb Chicago or what have you. Started doing outreach to them and started getting coverage in every single one of them every single week, and got this process down to where it amplified itself. Eventually, I pinged the editor-in-chief at Curbed LA, and she emailed everyone else, all of their other editors, asking them to email me when I was coming out with the map for their specific city. So these things kind of snowball upon themselves. The second slide I showed was about a flywheel. You're pushing really, really hard, or if you get a flywheel going, it starts working on its own. And so that's what we're really looking for. So what stories can you tell? It doesn't have to look pretty at first, though that never hurts. If you're being super scrappy, you can go and the visual that you can see in this story that we did about top pet-friendly cities for renting with pets. I did that in Excel. I put it into a post, and this is what people embedded around. I didn't have a designer that I could get access to, so we just went ahead and did it ourselves and proved that it could work. This piece right here, I did have a data scientist that was able to that was pulling the data for me and making sure it made sense, it was correct, all these sorts of things. We did use our internal data here, and we received 12 big sites linking back to it, right? So we're talking about, you called it Google Juice earlier, I call it link equity. We received other websites linking back to us, which helped our rankings in the search engines, which was one of our main KPIs for doing content there. So we used Tableau, Excel, and we published it on our own CMS. And then we used our email systems and had an in-house PR person that would do the bigger outreach. But that's not necessarily necessary. So it also doesn't have to take a lot of time with telling these stories. So this is an example of another one that we did at HotPads where, I don't know if any of you are House of Cards fans, but so when season 3 came out, and I apologize to anyone that I'm spoiling House of Cards for, but the main character becomes president at the end of season 2, and then season 3, he's moving into the White House. And so this launched, and I went into the office that day and said, oh my gosh, we have to do something about this, like we're a housing website. And so what we did was we created a fake listing for Frank Underwood renting out his house as he was moving into the White House. We literally did this in 3 hours, and we even had a Google Voice phone number that you could call that had a recording of Frank Underwood saying something like, did you think I forgot about you, or something like that. Did it super quickly, did some outreach. We were on the front page of Yahoo News. All the curb syndicates picked us up. Today.com picked us up. It was scalable like that because we already had these lists that we could do outreach to. So we published it, and instantly outreach happened, social media happened, and everything worked. So start small, then scale, right? You don't have to go and build out, as we were just talking about, like a 30-person channel sales team. Same thing with content. You don't have to say that you're going to be that you will do this with every that you're going to double down on this strategy. The strategy might not work, and so you're going to have to change it, right? So start small, start scrappy. Think about Zillow, right? Zillow is huge, phenomenal company. I worked for them for 2 years. They're seen as number one in they are the number one in the real estate space. So their housing reports, they put out these housing reports every single month for all the major metros in the United States. They started small, doing them manually for the top 10 metros. And then they realized that this added value to their audience. And so now they do them automatically every month for every single major market. And the outreach is done automatically as well, right? You can think about, you could build, specific email lists for these areas, or just people who inquired on houses in those areas in the last month. make sure they're added to the list so that they're continuing to learn, about their area, and you are number one, giving them the information that they need, staying top of mind for them. Hungry House is another example in the UK that's doing it, where they're doing their top, they call them takeaways or takeout shops, places that you can go and pick up your food from, and doing this every single year, right? They could take it and do it monthly as well if they wanted to take it to the next level, and then automate it. Eventually, you're going to say, okay, this is really working for us, and now it's time to take it, and it's time to productize it. So this is Open Startups from Baremetrics. So Buffer was one of the first companies that wanted their, venture funded startup company that wanted to, they wanted to make all their metrics public, because transparency is one of their company core values and one of their biggest marketing. I don't want to call it a shtick, but it's a marketing tactic for them, or a strategy for them, I think is better. And so they started this cascade, and everyone's using Baremetrics because Baremetrics allows you to track your recurring revenue and your churn and all of those things, using Stripe and whatever. And so they basically, they reached out to all these other companies and said, okay, ConvertKit, do you want us, can we make your numbers, you have your numbers public? Can we publish them here? And they created this page that they're putting the public numbers of all of these companies, how much revenue they're making, all these sorts of things. They're making it public, and this is getting them, it's getting them links, it's getting them attention. And then, as I said, semi-automate the marketing. You can semi-automate it by building your email lists that get emailed via whatever email program you use, SendGrid, Mandrill, whatever it is. Glassdoor does this, for example. Automatically sharing it on social media a few times, right? Using Buffer or Meet Edgar if you're using WordPress, to publish these bigger long-form pieces. There are plugins that you can use that will automatically do this. With my own company, every single time I publish a blog post or publish a piece of content, it's automatically tweeted, it's automatically shared on Facebook, and everyone that signs up to, if I have like an embedded email list, that automatically goes into a Facebook custom audience. I don't have to do anything there. I don't have to download anything. It just automatically goes in and it works. So tying all of those things together. So today I've talked about hopefully some strategies that you can take, and you can think about, how do I take these bigger content pieces that I want to do, whether it's putting together 52 days or 52 weeks of content. How do I take that, and how do I not have to do any manual work of downloading Excel spreadsheets and putting them in other places? When I hit publish, everything happens for me, happens for my company, so that I can focus on making the content as amazing as it can be. And then I publish it, and I know that all the promotion, everything that I need to happen, all those processes are in place, and I can keep moving on and building my own company. So that's what I have. Thank you for your time.
Well done. So it seems like you had 2 points in the talk. One is automate everything so that when you publish once, it goes everywhere.
Automate as much as possible, yes.
As much as possible. And I thought it was pretty interesting that part of that was, hey, if people sign up for email, make the Facebook custom audience, so that you're doing some type of paid marketing with that.
You can. Yep.
And so that's interesting. But there are formatting issues when you do that, right? Is that an issue?
It's not super clean, but I mean, with Facebook custom audiences, really all you need is an email address, right, that you can import. And so you import that, and then you have your customer list. And so, there might be a little bit of like formatting cleanup that happens somewhere in there. But most of the systems work together pretty well these days.
I was thinking more like the creative and Facebook uses a different type of image size, or, works better with a certain amount of text, and, text on Twitter is 140 characters. So do you run into issues with that?
No, not really. And plus, you can always go back and you can edit your Facebook post. You can edit your tweets, obviously, but you can go back and you can edit your Facebook post, put more context to it, or some different plugins. You can say, okay, pull the first 150 words of the post and use that as the Facebook post or something like that. And so you just write for that to take it into account.
And with Buffer, you can set up a schedule. They have a power scheduler now where you can go in and just say, I'm going to repeat the same piece of content weekly.
Do this in 8 hours, do this in 24 hours, do this 7 days from now, et cetera.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
It's super powerful.
And your first point seemed to be, don't write so many blog posts.
Absolutely.
But put data and put a chart in it.
Right.
And the chart makes it newsworthy. So if you could write 5 blog posts, that's your opinion, or do one with a chart that has data, do the one with data.
Do the chart with the data. What we actually did with those, it was like the future of San Francisco housing, it was an embedded map. And so once I got in touch with some of the curved editors, I actually asked them, okay, what are your dimensions for embeds? And so they told me it was like, 640 by like 380 or something like that. And so when I sent them the embed code, I had it sized to exactly what they needed, so they didn't have to do anything. Copy paste, put it into their into their publishing platform, and hit go, and it was going to look good.
And so thinking about who your targets are, less targets, but putting more effort in making it easier for them, as opposed to just throwing up blog posts into the wild and hoping for the best.
Absolutely, right. So having that outreach list, and then as was being talked about earlier, you can also take that and I could leverage the Curbed name and say, hey, we've been referenced on Curbed, every single time for the last 6 months. Hey, Washington Post, hey, so and so, like
As
you
seen
should write
in
about us
Curbed.
as well. Exactly.
You can collect all those as seen in for your landing page.
There you go.
Where do you get the data from? I mean, if you don't have the data from your product or service, where do you get the data from?
It's a good question. It's going to differ for every single industry, obviously. It's just going to differ, right? So in the rental space, it was right there with the ALN database that was actually people just used for sales and developers used and all that. It just had information about all the different buildings and their station. You can figure out how you gather it. So Brian was he mentioned Rapify. Rapify is getting a lot of love in this episode.
Yeah.
If they wanted to do something like a heat maps that continuously updated, and you could see like where is Rapify most popular, or where they where cars that are covered in that are wrapped are. You could put it like a GPS tracker or something like that in there, right? Obviously anonymize all of it, but you could start collecting that data over time. There are a lot of different places that you can.
One of the interesting things was you found data that seemed to be just outside where you were working. So what rentals have cats? Not exactly like the most important piece of data, but kind of fun.
Yeah, totally.
And important to the people who have cats.
Right.
Or strange people, but
Yep.
yeah, for the cat people.
But I think figuring out what those triggers are for people, or not triggers, but like what do people really care about psychologically? So we did one piece that it was so in San Francisco, for every minute longer of a commute or minute shorter of a commute, how much more do you have to pay? Because people care about expense, people care about money, right? It's
So
not
that's
about housing necessarily.
That's taking two different statistics that you can
Yep.
get from two different places. You're getting commute information from Waze or Google Maps.
Exactly.
And then you're
And
correlating
using
it with
our own listing information and pricing.
What did you
putting
find
them
in
together.
that chart or that study that you did?
That one, I honestly don't remember. It was like a year and a half ago that it came out, 2 years ago.
Was there
that it
anything
came out,
specific
but,
though? Like, what was the best value for commute to dollar?
Yeah, we definitely. The interesting thing was you had to take into account like geography and all that sort of thing. But like in San Francisco, for example, Nob Hill is obviously like super expensive, but people could have a really short commute, and so it might be worthwhile for the lifestyle trade-off where you don't have to get in your car, you don't have to take Muni, right? Like we all know how terrible Muni is in San Francisco, right? So those sorts of things that can play off, and people have been talking a lot more about that sort of thing these days as well, right? So whatever you can do to kind of hook into what they're currently caring about. Whether it's money, it's rent prices, it's being able to walk to work, it's whatever. You can tell that story.
Great, awesome. Let's take a question. Brian, do you have a question to start out?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that I loved about John and this whole story was thinking back to just maybe the 50 incubator companies. I think maybe 5 of them have blogging as a superpower, right? The rest of them are kind of lost. When they announced their company was coming out, they had to go to Medium and sign up for Medium for the first time ever, and then do a blog post about, yay, I announced at Jason's conference.
Right.
And they've never done another post since, right?
Right.
So how can you take those people who are just never going to be bloggers? I've built blogs, I don't blog, right?
Right.
I can't do it. So how do you take them and say, look, 4 times a year, find some really amazing story that people are going to want to go amplify for you, right? And that can be something where if you do work in pets or cats, anybody who knows somebody who's a crazy cat person is going to share that with them.
Yeah.
So good, you've got the shareability in there. And the flip side is like that number of dollars per commute, what you save, lifestyle things. If you can just find like what is the data that I'm sitting on that nobody else has, or my data plus somebody else's, right? The travel or the rental or the whatever those things are, marry that. You can make something every quarter that's a report, put some time into that, spend some money on that, and then get that out there. And people can expect, you're not going to waste my time. You're not going to talk to me a lot, but when you do, it's gold. It's something amazing. I'm going to take that and run with it. So
Bill Gurley,
fantastic advice.
the venture capitalist, doesn't often write a blog post. When he does, it can move the market.
Right.
It can change the entire conversation in Silicon Valley. Like when we're saying, hey, these valuations are getting too high and there are these issues with spending. people need to come back to reality. Or he started bringing up India and the massive race to burn $100 bills in India on startups and lose money.
Right.
Like it really became like the Wall Street Journal and CNBC start talking about it. Great. Do we have a question from one of our amazing portfolio companies? Okay, so we have a question from Ben from Butterfly. Go ahead, Ben.
Hey John, thanks for the presentation. It was very useful.
Sure thing.
So my question is around. So I learned how to make a better blog and more interesting information. But I think you touched on it in an earlier question. I wanted you to elaborate on it. How can we? So beside automating it and putting it out in our own social media and blogs, what can I do to make it more interesting for other people to want to copy this and want to put it out there? How can I get this outreach email that you said? There are other people that have the bigger blogs and the news outlets that see this.
Right, for sure. It's a great question. So basically, you're talking about when you're doing outreach, how do you actually get people to respond to you? How do you actually get people to care? Yeah. So the best way to do this, and I have my first job in SEO was actually doing link building for a marketing agency in Philadelphia. So I literally sent, 10,000 emails in that year or something like that, like ton of emails. And so this comes from a lot of testing of that over the years. The biggest thing that people get wrong is that it's not about when you're sending an email to someone else. Personal emails tend to be like about us, and it's like, hey, want to give you this update. When you're doing outreach to a journalist or someone like that, it's all about them. They don't care who you are necessarily. They care about what you're able to do for them, right? So saying, I know that you write about this. I saw that you wrote this story, and here's some new data that we came out with, in partnership with such and such company, that tells this story, right? And just putting it in like one or two sentences, super quick, up at the top. So as they're scanning through their inbox, then they pick that one out because everyone else is like, hey, hope you were well. So you're doing cool things over at such and such, and they're like, you don't know me, right? Like you're at least kind of admitting that you don't know them by getting straight to the chase and saying you're a busy person, and here's some things that I think would be interesting. And really what you're trying to do there is you're not trying to send an email and then all of a sudden, and you're not going to be able to send an email and then all of a sudden get coverage. What you're trying to do is you're trying to pique their interest and you're trying to get their response, right? Sales 101. You're not trying to, get them to come and sign up directly. That very rarely happens. You're just trying to start that conversation. It's the same way with, a blogger or a journalist or someone like that. And one hack, at least, when you're starting, it's not super scalable, though I think you can figure out ways to scale it, is, using social media as well. Because a lot of journalists, they're on social media, they're on Twitter, that sort of thing, interacting with them, start off with favoriting their stuff, retweet it, leave comments, ping them, suggestions and thoughts that you have. And then once you go to email them, or even better, say, hey, have a question for you, can I drop you an email? And often they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. It's so-and-so at this.
But at the end of the day, John, if the content is not interesting, there is nothing you can do. No amount of outreach, no amount of starring and favoriting them and telling them you love them is going to make them take, something and shine it and make it into some diamond or something.
Absolutely.
It's your job to give them a diamond.
Right.
I think in your case, Ben, there was, and obviously Butterfly is in the home security space with a portable camera that's battery-powered HD and does computer imaging on the actual unit so it can tell what's in the image without going up to the cloud. If you look at the doorbell company Ring, which is not a direct competitor, but in the same space, they do cameras. They have an incredible content marketing campaign, which was people stealing stuff. And if somebody was stolen on your doorstep, like a package, sharing it with the world. And they kept sending those really viral videos to a bunch of local news. And local news and even national news, they're desperate to get video to keep people watching, right? So in your case, you have this great thing with video. Yeah. I wonder what you could do with the Butterfly cameras since they are portable. If there was something you could do where you put a portable camera in a place where, you wouldn't normally be able to put one, and you're able to capture stuff on camera and then share that with them, that's when it becomes, I think, super newsworthy. And that's why I think in that product Ring, when you have a video that's like one button, you can share it, right? You can immediately share the video on social media. So they're telling their users explicitly, if something happens, and they're telling them, tell us when something happens and publish it to our website, publish it to YouTube, and let's get people to look at it. And of course, it's got the Ring logo on the watermark. So I think there's something there in content where you can take those cameras and record stuff. or time lapse something, or the number of dogs in a dog park, or the number of people who don't pick up after their dogs in Mission Dolores Park, and you put the butterfly up, and you show the number of people who come to the park, and it identifies number of poops that weren't picked up. Just imagine if you went to Curbed, your go-to, or to San Francisco Chronicle or whatever, and said, listen, we actually have empirical evidence. We put the cameras in the dog parks, and we said 27% of people are not cleaning up after their dogs. And the number one offenders were people with bulldogs. We don't know why, but it turns out bulldogs are just, those people are horrible people. But I think it's kind of funny because your thing about, percentage of people who allow cats in the rentals, I think was.
Something like that, yeah, pet-friendly rentals, yep.
Yeah. What's a punch-up? He's got this camera that's intelligent, that knows what's in the photo. What would you do? Just think for a second and brainstorm. Brian, you can brainstorm as well. Maybe you have something you can think of. Scott, let's all brainstorm for a second. If you were going to help Butterfly come up with content marketing for a camera that had computer, it's a picture a drop cam or any kind of camera like that has computer intelligence, computer vision on the camera. So it could actually know that a dog is going to the bathroom, as opposed to just a dumb camera. It could know that a child, climbed to the top of a structure. It could know that somebody came out of the Starbucks with 1, 2, or 3 drinks, all through computer vision.
Yeah. So,
what's your best content marketing? Think about it. Yeah, Go ahead.
So
you're buzzing in.
The bacon number, right? Everyone
bacon number.
Let me go with it. So the bacon number is basically is a theory that says that you're connected to everyone in the world by 6 connections.
Oh, Kevin
right?
Bacon.
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
So what if you had you basically put it on people walking around, say San Francisco, walking around a busy city. You'd have to do it in a busy city to make it work, and then somehow looping into like Facebook's Open Graph. And then basically say like either what is the average of every people that you pass, like how far are you disconnected from, or how closely are you connected to people that you that you walk by on the street, right? So in New York City, say like the average person is like only 1.5 steps removed, from you. So like then you could basically say any person you walk up to on this city block, on average, you're gonna be able to find one person in common that you know. Right? Something like that, people would be like, holy crap, like that's crazy how connected the world is. Like that would blow my mind.
That's terrorizing.
I know, right?
A terrorizing example. No, I think it's a fun example.
It'd be fascinating.
There is something to that example, because but facial recognition, very interestingly, as with license plate recognition, is a hot button issue, as we all know. So I think that actually makes it worth doing in some way, like because you can build off of that charged energy. Brian, did you have one?
I'm just thinking of, so what I would do. Obviously, I don't run the product team and know enough about the company. I know what the product does. So I think the pets and kids thing is always amazing, right? So if you can do anything that counts the number of times a pet does this, or a kid does this, or pets with kids, then that becomes something amazing. But that's more taking and sharing out that one video, like the people running off of your porch because you're talking to them and they're like, oh crap, I was about to steal the FedEx. And the guy's talking to me, he must be home, and then they run away. And those are the videos that get shared from the Nest cameras,
or people
right?
just grabbing the box and running.
Well, they grab it anyway. Once they realize it's Nest, then that wears off because they saw it on the news. And so now they just take the box anyway because they know you're not home. So that's kind of funny. That's sad. It defeats the camera. But I think, so the one thing is pets and kids, right? How do you work in pets and kids? But the other is the news jacking. I liked that thing with the House of Cards where this is going on. We're going to make a fake thing in our product. So how can you take a product like that and look at things that are Stranger Things? And what if Stranger Things in the 80s had the butterfly camera?
Yeah.
They would have just solved the problem. Like there would have been no mystery. They figured out it was a ghost or whatever, like immediately from episode 1, right? Yeah. So how do you kind of go and work your product into things like that? But the news jacking of the jumping into a news cycle, something that's hot. The Luke Cage is on, Netflix. It drops on a Friday, and on a Saturday, there's what if Luke Cage had a butterfly? This would have all there would have been no. They would have caught the guy in the first episode. Again, each of these, every single time.
And that's
like,
a comedy.
We don't need 3rd
that's
episodes.
the comedy angle of content creation, which I think is very hard to pull off.
It is hard to pull off. It's delicate.
I highly recommend that if you're in the startup space or in a business-to-business context, be extremely careful with comedy for 2 reasons. One, it's probably not going to be funny because you're not Chris Rock or Eddie Murphy or Seinfeld. And number 2, big chance of offending because much of the humor that's if you think about the comedians I just talked about, they probably offend some percentage of people with each joke. And in business, you cannot offend anybody, especially not in the climate we're in. When Trump wins, it'll probably change and you can offend anybody you want. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Okay, great. Anybody else have a question? All right, well done. This concludes our jam session. I hope it was helpful to you. We run these jam sessions, as I said in the beginning, for our portfolio companies to help them get smarter. And if you would like to be one of our portfolio companies, apply to the Launch Incubator. You can just Google that. Or come to the Scale Conference, launchscale.net, November 14th and 15th. We're constantly trying to put out great content for our portfolio companies, but as well, we like to syndicate some of it to y'all watching on iTunes. If you like this, please email Jackie at launch.co and tell her what you liked about it. If you have ideas for speakers, email Jackie as well. Or if you loved it and it's absolutely 5 stars, please go to iTunes and write a review. We love hearing from our audience, and we love seeing those reviews come in. Thank you so much to our partners and sponsors and speakers today, and Brian Albee for executive producing this. And we'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.
Our iTunes review of the week is from Jazz Fan Dude. Jason C. is just about my favorite interviewer these days, not just in the podcast world, but in virtually any medium. If you like Twist, please write a review.